This video is brought to you by GrayFox Strategic. Use code DA10 for 10% off your next purchase at grayfoxstrategic.ca.
All right, based on a few comments from a previous video that we released on single man entry. Just to follow up with some of the comments, the single man entry would not be optimal. I mean, we're working in teams of two as a minimum would be most optimal for the mutual support back-to-back philosophy. That being said, worst case scenario, if we had to enter that room, i.e. there's a kid screaming, there's a hostage rescue scenario, the stack has been depleted, people are busy doing whatever you're gonna do. If we needed to get in there to deal with it, the argument might be, well, I would wait. Well, what are you waiting for? You're waiting for a kid or an innocent bystander to get slaughtered, or are we gonna go in and deal with it? This is a way. It's not the only way. There's multiple different ways to skin the cat. The reason that I approach the door and enter the way I do is the gun is in the shoulder and I'm in a position ready to fight, whether that's to deal with somebody going hands-on or to actually use the firearm for a ballistic response. The reason that I prefer this method, it adds a little bit of stability, mobility, but some speed. So when we make the assessment at the threshold, we're not over-penetrating the threshold with the muzzle of the gun before our body is in behind the platform. So to reinforce the context, if I'm by myself, and the rest of the stack is busy doing something else down the hallway or they're tied up in another avenue, what my objective is to gain as much information from this room before actually having to go in. The decision would be based on what the stimulus is on the inside, i.e. a kid is screaming for help, or there's a savage in there with a blade to somebody's throat or something of that nature. But if I can, I'm gonna clear as much of that room from the outside before making entry, knowing that I'm by myself, expecting or anticipating that at some point a team member is going to join the stack, give me a squeeze, and then I know I've got some mutual support. So all we know at this point is the door is open. We don't know what's inside. We don't necessarily know the layout or if there's any obstacles like furniture, for example. So trying to collect as much information as I possibly can from the hallway. Right now I'm about 4 to 5 feet away from the door. As I'm looking into the depth of the room, picture we're the skinny part of the funnel. And what we're doing is we're opening up the wide part of the funnel and we're funneling the environment and we're gaining as much information as we can. As our angle changes, so too does the angle of vision in what we're looking at. So for an example, right now, you can see partial of the inside of that room, but if I put the gun in my other side, in my opposite side, for example, and I'm a little bit closer to the wall and a little bit closer to the threshold in terms of what might be down that corner, I'm giving myself a little bit more information. Right now, what I see is what you don't see, and you'll see in a second, is there's a small obstacle on the inside of that room, which is a partition that comes off of the wall. What I deduct from that is there could be a human on the other side of that, right? But that's giving me the information that I require to now let it go and look for something else. Being right-hand dominant, I'd much rather the platform in my dominant side. So as the angle changes, so too does the vision of what we're looking at. So without over-penetrating the muzzle past the threshold, we continue to open our arcs up and take as much information as we can, given the fact that we've got a frame here and a little bit of ballistic protection. So a solid core door, we got some steel, we got some 2x4. So there's no requirement for me to be completely in the threshold where I can use as much of the environment to give me an element of protection. Therefore, I'm reading the information and then making decisions before actually entering.
So back in 2016, I was able to start working with Kydex, and the reason I wanted to start working with Kydex was because I was a left-handed shooter. Finding left-handed gear was extremely hard. So I just put 2 and 2 together, started working with Kydex, making left-handed holsters for myself. From there, quote unquote, refined my process. Started making gear for buddies that were cops in military, and it literally snowballed from there.
Everything that we do is handmade by shooters for shooters, and there's a lot of other Kydex companies out there, and they are also for shooters by shooters. But we take the time and we care about what we do, and I think that shows in our products.
Like working here, this is our home. We brought it from home and we created a home. Our kids have worked here, so this is our home.
So with a little bit of speed, coming down the hallway, I'm waiting for a stack, I'm waiting for some support. I'm not gonna enter just yet, taking as much information as I possibly can. We gather it. I'm going to step myself in, read the wall, read the door. Now what I see is a corner-fed room. There's a wall on the left-hand side. There's nothing for me here. I'm going to give you two options. Option A, sometimes referred to as running the rabbit. That's essentially I'm going to jet across this wall, opening up my arcs, which will then change the angle of the information that I'm collecting. So option A, there's nothing. I'm going to enter, open my arcs, open up the hips, keep myself in motion. So if there is a human being on the other side of that visual barrier, for example, now he's got to try to hit a moving target. Pros and cons to that. Option B is once we're here, we read that it's a corner-fed room, opening up the hips. So when I enter, the first thing that's going to enter the room is the muzzle. The second thing is my vision. And when you get really good at it, those two are connected. Right? So right now I can see inside the room. If I need to make a shot, we bring the gun up a couple of inches, we find the sights, and we release the shot. There's nothing wrong with flat stock ready, except for it's an added movement. Pros and cons of that. The other con is if something comes around that corner, and if that thing wants to give us some active resistance, now we're in the potential of getting into a scrap where the gun is outside the shoulder, so i.e., it's no good for a ballistic shot, because we have to shoulder the gun. It's also not optimal if we need to get in a scrap and deal with somebody with their hands. There's the higher probable chance that this gun is going to ride up over the shoulder and you're going to catch the sights in your teeth. So, I mean, if you want to be chicletless, then sure, that's a good idea. Me personally, I don't. So, enter, penetration step. Now we're in a position to scrap and we drive. So, pros and cons to different methods. But hopefully what you take away from this is before entering or even making the commitment to enter, we're trying to gain as much information as we possibly can. As our angles and our footwork changes, so too does the information that we collect from this environment.